So very happy to have you all here. I see we're around 60 people already now. That's huge. That's very, very interesting and exciting for us to do that. And we hope that everything will work on a technical level. And if anything's not working, just send us emails, chats, or whatever, so that we can address it. So there's a team working on it continuously, and I think we will try to have the best discussion we may have without meeting in person. And just to start, to say that, as many of you know, we started to think about this workshop already last year in autumn, and we told you that we would do such a workshop in spring at our launch event in Berlin in late October. The slight difference to now is that we imagined a workshop that was supposed to be called or to answer the question how to prepare for the next crisis. So this was in October, December, even January, February, and we wanted to make this workshop 1.5 days at exactly the date that we are doing it, but in Berlin in our project center, and about the next crisis. So we realized in February, March, that this is not about the next crisis, but we're exactly in the crisis, in the midst of a crisis, which is very different from what we imagined. We wanted to talk about the potential next climate crisis, the potential next financial crisis. We didn't think so much about a pandemic, but in the end, we realized that the questions are not so far away from what we would have discussed. I mean, that's a very urgent case that demands new answers from central banks, from governments, fiscal policy, which is a threat to the Eurozone, and so on and so on. This has all been on our agenda in the former agenda. So now we are having a not so different agenda, just with a very, very different crisis and a very big shock that we didn't imagine to come. But we're very happy to have the opportunity to do this workshop in that field. And as I said at the beginning, try to answer some very, very important questions that need to be answered. And we're in contact with a lot of people, also have decision makers, who make us feel that they are all in search of new answers and of answers of what could be the next step after the first very big steps that the central bank governments have done. So what will be next? And that's exactly what we want to answer and what we will discuss with a huge number of very, very exciting and excellent experts. For us, just to mention, as Forum New Economy, this is part of our work. I mean, we would have discussed this anyway, but it's sort of also reflecting our fundamental idea of thinking about how can a new economic policy be able to respond to such crisis and have a new paradigm that will be more adapted to the current situation in general, with all situations, the inequality, globalization, the crisis of globalization in a way. And now we are in the midst of a crisis which may accelerate in a way some of these crises and also needs new answers. Very probably this crisis, and I mean, it seems quite obvious, will not be answered by the old paradigm. And so we are in the midst of joining this very new these very new questions to our agenda of searching for a new paradigm. This leads to our partners for this workshop, which is the Transformative Response to the Crisis project. And I would like to hand over to Gerhard to say some words on this, because they are working in a very similar field, and we wanted to do that workshop anyway with you. Just tell us some words about this very, very new initiative.
Thank you, Thomas, and hello to everyone. My name is Gerhard Schick. I head the new financial market non-governmental organization in Germany, Finanzwende, or Finance Watch Germany. And together with other organizations, we've started a project that we call Transformative Responses to the Next Crisis. And of course, we changed the name because we're now in this crisis. Let me just share some slides with you to present the project. I hope you can see that. already last year, we said it is necessary in civil society to get prepared for a possible next crisis. And now we try to make sure that we use this crisis. It's a project done by several organizations, Finanzwende in the lead in cooperation with Heinrich Böll Stiftung, which is the political foundation affiliated to the Green Party in Germany, but with other foundations supporting this project, which is set up for 3 years. We want to draw a lesson from the past, and I personally lived that last financial crisis of 2008 and following years as a member of parliament for the Green Party in the German Bundestag. And we could see that after the first stabilization measure, it was difficult to get good policy responses through the old conflicts between strong lobby organizations by banks and funds on the one side and very few independent experts on the other side led to a lack of thorough reform responses to the last financial crisis. Alternative economic proposals didn't get sufficient traction in media or politics at that time. And the methods used to bring economies out of the crisis exacerbated problems and perhaps made it more probable that we come into a next crisis. And what we could also see was that there was a lack of preparation in civil society, and that's the logic of this project. It is important that civil society has a role in these moments, but for that, there needs to be cooperation and good preparation. Our aim is to find transformative answers to this crisis. The idea is that we not only stick with stabilizing the current system, but that we use this moment where billions are spent to make our system more resilient, to make sure that the financial sector is more stable after this crisis, that we use the huge amounts of money spent to also address the ecological crisis, the climate crisis, the loss of biodiversity, and that we make sure that the wealth inequality is less pronounced after this crisis than when we entered this crisis. We want to address long-term reforms and not only the short-term fixes. And that led to the title of this conference that we now hold as a webinar together with the Forum New Economy. Our activities start, of course, with the Corona crisis now. The idea is to have a European coalition with other civil society actors and make sure that civil society is heard and that alternative economic ideas and transformative ideas are heard in the discussion of these weeks and months. We want to enable research on transformative ways out of the crisis. And the start, is already planned last year, is this cooperation with the Forum New Economy, the conference, the Corona economic shock, short-term urgency and long-term prospects that we start at this moment. I want to use the opportunity to say thank you to Thomas Fricke and his team for the cooperation in preparing this conference. Thank you very much for that. I think it's very fruitful to think the two projects together and make sure that this tense moment of political discussion and economic decision-making is really used for transformative answers. The Forum New Economy's approach is more on the paradigm shift. Our focus is more on the more concrete transformative responses. But I think what we both have in common, what we share, is that crisis moments are decisive. I heard climate experts say recently, it is now that we decide if we can reach the 1.5 degree goal or if we can't. But because once the huge amount of money is spent in the crisis, the possibility to mobilize again huge investment for a transformation will be lost. So I'm looking forward to this conference. We will participate tomorrow with a forum on the financial markets, and I will moderate the conference on the paradigm shift, the webinar tomorrow evening. And I wish us all fruitful discussions. And I pass over to Thomas again. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerd. There was a problem with your slides, apparently, but we would share the slides later on. But we arranged that for later, so people can see. Thanks a lot. I think it's a very exciting cooperation that we have, and two different angles to discuss some very similar questions. And now, in the midst of this crisis, we need to discuss them further. I would just before we start with our first session, to indicate, to give you just a quick overview of what we want to do. So we want to start with let's say, setting the scene with a very German view of this crisis. We have invited Achim Truger to present the very recent first major study of the German Council of Economic Experts in brief. Then Patrick Reichen, who will be with us, who has presented and discussed and now discussing a very noticed paper on a double booster, which opens our discussion, which we will also continue tomorrow, on the very profound question of how to make this recovery something which is not only supporting growth in short-term or economic activity, but may help some more longer-term things and make our societies and economies more resilient. And Tom Krebs will discuss these proposals from Mannheim. We will have a very exciting panel afterwards on globalization with James, Ian Golden, Laurence Toubiana, and Pascal Ami, with this very big question: what are the long-term structural consequences of this crisis on globalization? We will discuss all that in detail. So this is our opening for today, these two big issues, big questions. Tomorrow we will have, then, let's say, the working sessions with an update on the corona pandemic, the big question on how to exit the lockdown, then the real economic crisis. So how deep will this crisis be? Will it end up in a great corona depression, or will there be a quick upswing after the lockdown? We will have a session that Gerhard was talking about, where Gerhard and his colleagues will present a study on the financial side of this crisis. We will have a discussion on central banks, very exciting, about also the question of helicopter money. Is this the time for helicopter money? We will continue with fiscal policy. Will the trillions be enough? On tomorrow in the afternoon, also with some very distinguished panelists. And then come to the decision or the discussion on the Eurozone, with the big question for Euro bonds or Corona bonds or whatever, which is, I mean, as I said at the beginning, in the midst of a very, very important discussion up to the EU Council summit on Thursday. And we will end up at this workshop with a more general discussion on the future prospects and the big question: how to make us more resilient to such shocks, because very probably this will not be the last one. And also there we will have some very distinguished speakers. That's on the program. Just some housekeeping rules. As you may now be used to when you follow such webinars, please tell us if you have some questions via the Q&A function or the chat function. The speakers, we will, maybe not all, depending on their time, but also be able to answer questions after the sessions. So there's an opportunity to keep our time and still have some discussion afterwards. There's a team around who will screen the questions and let us discuss more properly. And for anyone who wants, for this afternoon, we will have a synchronous translation, German, English. You will find this at the Zoom with a button where you can switch from English to German if you want. This is important, the first session we will hold in German. It's a German session with German speakers, so we in the end decided it may be wise to let them speak in German and then have a translation. The rest will be in English and then translated into German for anyone who wants. This is for today. Tomorrow there will not be any translation. If you want to be updated, as we imagine that you won't be following each and every minute that we're doing, you may, and we hope that you will, but if not, we will update you via Twitter on when new sessions are starting, when speakers are starting, and so on. So follow us on @Forum New Economy, so you will be updated on all this.